I've got 10 tips that we're going to go through for having tough conversations with aging parents. These are, through my 10 plus years of working with retired folks, just a little blueprint of how I would approach these conversations. The number one tip for sure is to start early. I can't tell you how many clients we help that have waited or never had a conversation, or they don't start having these conversations until one parent has passed away and then the other one is in a nursing home. The earlier you can have these conversations among parents and adult children, the better off you'll be. Certainly, if there's an urgent medical issue, these conversations will then happen, but we'd like them to happen earlier than crisis mode. In our office, when we're talking about planning for folks, we've got two real tracks. One is advanced planning, which is doing something before it's necessary, before the crisis occurs. And then the second topic, the second area of focus for us is crisis planning. I had a meeting with our team this morning, and in my little planner, there's a quote that says, and I thought it was really fitting for today's conversation: plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. I thought that hit the nail right on the head for this type of conversation with adult parents. The earlier you start, the better you will be, the more comfortable everyone will be. So a good time, if you're thinking age, to be honest with you, the time that this should happen initially is around retirement. When mom and dad or mom or dad are getting ready to retire, that's traditionally in my business when we would start laying the groundwork for, what the next 20, 30, 40 years of life will look like for those individuals. That's about the time I would do it. Anytime thereafter is a good time. One of the important pieces to this is to recognize that this is not a one-off. You're not just going to have one conversation with your parents or with your children and expect it to all be wrapped up in a neat little bow. It's a little bit of a process. I think it's really important that you exercise patience. So when you're going to have the first conversation with your parents, I don't like to have, in my mind, you shouldn't have the idea that there will be hard outcomes, meaning you're not going to resolve all of these issues in the very first conversation. Your parents may want to postpone the discussions, especially if it's about money or getting caregivers. I like to start with, start small. And really what you're trying to do is show your parent or your loved one that you're willing to have this conversation and that you're willing to be helpful to them in this process. It may be difficult for a lot of adult parents to accept that help from their children. It represents somewhat of a role reversal. From all points before that, it was the parent providing assistance to the child typically. And we get to the time period later on in life where we have a little bit of a role reversal. Obviously, if you're in an immediate crisis situation, patience may get thrown out the window because, the expediency of needing to get something accomplished may take the hold. But for sure, if we're planning in advance, if we're starting early, we want to be patient. This is a process. You have to choose the right conditions, and I mean time, location, and you want it to be where your parents are going to be receptive to discussing end-of-life issues. You want it to be private for sure. So this is not something we're going to do, if we can ever go back out to restaurants. You're not going to do this in the middle of a crowded restaurant. You want it to be comfortable for the parent. I would have an idea in mind about, what your soft goals would be going into the conversation, and plan for it to be an ongoing discussion, that you're not going to resolve everything within the first sit down. A lot of times doing it within the parent's own home is where they're going to feel most comfortable. And then you want to make sure you're choosing a time where there's not other significant things going on. Another tip that I always will counsel the kids beforehand: do your homework. Don't go blind into this conversation where you're not equipped to talk, if your parents really will engage you, where you're not equipped to talk about things like end-of-life care or caregiving. You really have to have a decent base of knowledge, which we're going to hopefully provide to you today, on what some of the options are, how the system works, what the parents should be looking to accomplish. So definitely don't go in blind. Those of you who are here are already checking that one off the list, or at least starting to check that off the list. Involve your siblings. This is the number one area where we have significant issues down the road, where we have a group of siblings, and it just generally happens that the ones that are not geographically in the area kind of get left out. So you want to make sure, even if they can't be physically or present via some kind of communication device, nowadays with all of us doing Zoom, it's made a lot of this somewhat simpler, but you want to make sure that the siblings are involved. The big one for me, kind of buried in the middle here, is conversing with empathy. So you have to keep in mind that the thought of nearing, what we'll call the twilight of your years from the Frank Sinatra song, or the possibility of losing independence, is an emotionally taxing thought. So you have to use empathetic language. I see you, I hear you, I understand you. Don't make it about the kid, make it about the parent. We're talking about the parent. We're talking about what legacy they want to leave behind. And it's not that death is imminent. It's, smart people plan in advance for these things, okay? I think starting off from an angle of empathy, not sympathy, empathy, which is I see you, I hear you, I feel you, I understand you, that's going to put you in a better position going forward and kind of level the playing field with your parent. Hand in hand with empathy is listening. Again, it's not about you. This is about your parent. Really listen. Are they masking fear? Is there fear under the surface coming through, but they're trying to suppress it? Or maybe anger. They may have regrets about life, and kind of talking about that next chapter may bring some of those regrets to the surface. Are there goals that they haven't yet achieved? A lot of people, especially when they enter retirement time, have a whole new set of goals that they still want to accomplish. We're living longer and longer in this world, and in this country in particular. They say that the first person who will live to 150 has already been born. So retirement is getting longer and longer. And one of those opportunities then is to have a whole new set of bucket lists of things that the parents may want to accomplish. I think once you address these issues, it becomes a lot easier to talk about some of the legal and financial challenges. Again, I think you want to avoid pressuring them. You want to not be forceful. Start small. I think starting small is always the way. If you want to suggest some kind of change in behavior, rather than applying pressure, I think a gentle conversation where you're incrementally taking bites of the apple is going to work a lot better than having kind of like a drop dead all in one conversation where you bring all these issues to the front and trying to resolve them all at the same time. Number 9 is just don't be afraid to ask for help. One of the big things from our perspective is that we like to work with the family, with the kids, and with the parents to address their planning. Most professionals feel the same way, at least the ones that we interact with. So you may need a financial planner. You may need an accountant. You may need a care manager. You may need a lawyer. Don't be afraid to assemble a team. You're probably not going to want to bombard your parent during the first conversation, but this will be part of the roadmap to addressing all of these issues. And again, I think, one of the most important things for me, especially if you have siblings or family members that can't be present, is to keep good notes. Make sure you've created a record of the conversations to the extent that they should be written down, and maybe have some action items to work towards in terms of next steps. And a lot of that's going to be what we're going to talk about next. But I think having, this is by far the hardest part, in my opinion, of this process, is just kind of getting this out there and into the open and making sure that everybody is comfortable and coming from a place of love and understanding to address these issues and address them before it's too late. So that's my 10 tips. Hopefully that piece is helpful. And again, this is just based on our experience working with clients and then also our own family members.